Hi, third graders. I hope that you're all ready for chapter 14 in our Read Aloud Rump by Liesl Shurtliff. Just to remind you what we read about yesterday, Rump went to visit the Witch of the Woods, who's actually Red's grandma, and she told him that his mother used to spin straw into gold as well. It got her into trouble, and that's actually why she came to the mountain. Rump is right now worried because Opal is being held in the kingdom because her father, the miller, told the king, King Barf, that she was the one who was spinning straw into gold. And if she couldn't, then there would be consequences. So chapter 14 is titled Rump to the Rescue. It was afternoon when we reached my cottage. Red stood by me and finally spoke her mind. "You're going to go, aren't you?" "To help Opal." It wasn't a question, really, and the declaration cleared my own doubt. I had to go. Red let out a heavy sigh. Her brow was knit and her mouth curved down, but she didn't look angry. Was she sad? I've never seen Red sad. And that's when I realized that even if she did call me an idiot, Red really cared what happened to me. She was my one true friend. "Will you take care of milk for me?" "She gives some milk still." She nodded. "What about your donkey?" "I'm taking him with me." I didn't want to burden Red too much, and even though nothing was ornery and stubborn, he might be able to help me carry my things if I could get him to move. "How will you find Opal?" Red asked. I shrugged. "What if she's locked up?" I shrugged. "What if you get caught and shot with an arrow or poisoned or—" "Then I'll be dead, Red." I smiled because of the rhyme, even though it wasn't a happy one. Red gave me one of those rare smiles. "You're an idiot, Rump, but the smartest idiot I know." I put my hands in my pockets, pulled out the seed Red's granny had given me, and held it up to the sun. I thought how the odds were stacked against both the little seed and me, a boy tangled in life and magic. We didn't have a chance, really, but sometimes you still have to try. "Little things can grow," I said. "Under the right circumstances," said Red, as she bent down and dug up some cold earth. I placed the little seed in the hole, and we covered it up. After Red left, I stuffed just a few things in a satchel. A dry loaf of bread, some biscuits, a skin of water, and my mother's bobbin from her spinning wheel. I knew that it wasn't the reason for the magic, but I wanted it with me. A little piece of mother, a piece of home. I wish I could take a piece of Gran with me too, but there was nothing. I would have to carry a memory. It was late afternoon as I walked through the village toward the road that led down the mountain. I stopped once and looked back at the village. I had never seen it from this view. The houses were stacked in jumbled clusters up the mountainside, some so lopsided they looked like they might slide right down. Smoke rose from chimneys, and windows were lit with candles. The mill stood above all the houses, the biggest building by far. High above the village were the mines that I had worked in my whole life. I had never been anywhere but this village. Even though I knew there were other kingdoms and villages and probably mountains all over the world, this had always been my world. I imagined my mother leaving yonder and feeling the same. In my mind, I thought I would not be gone for very long, but in my heart, I felt like I was leaving on a great expedition, and if I ever returned, I would be very different. I hoped I would be different. I was leaving the mountain at last. True, my leaving might have sounded far grander if I was leaving a place with a real name, like Orkenleff or Astria, but I left just the same. It all sounded so big and adventurous, but my lofty sentiments were squashed before I had gotten even halfway down the mountain. Nothing didn't carry a thing. Instead, I hauled him. It was about as fun as playing with pixies. When I tried to ride him, he either wouldn't move or moved so fast I couldn't hold on. Then he stumbled and I fell off. I ended up pulling him the whole way while he bellowed and spit in my ear. When I finally reached the bottom of the mountain, it was night. Luckily, there was a little moonlight, or I wouldn't have been able to see it at all. I met a man driving a wagon, and he asked me how far it was to the kingdom and what direction. He pointed in the direction I was already going and said it was a good 12 miles. My heart sank. I would gladly give you a ride in my cart, said the man, but your donkey doesn't look like he'll keep up with the horse. No, I said, he wouldn't. I wanted to kick nothing. Maybe I could just tie him up and get a ride anyway. But then someone might steal him. Worthless as he was the only company I had on this journey. I gave another tug as we plodded down the road. After an hour, I was starving, so I ate all the biscuits in my sack. We found a stream to drink from and some early spring grass for nothing. After that, he settled right down in the grass and didn't want to move. I pulled and pulled, but he just bellowed. I got on his back and kicked him hard as I could with both legs. He still didn't move. I pulled my mother's bobbin and poked his side with it. He bellowed and jumped right up and started trotting down the path with me hanging on him sideways. Nothing carried me for only a few miles before I had to start pulling him again. And after another hour, I wondered if the man with the cart had been mistaken and it was really 12 miles or even 30. I had no sense for distance. Maybe I wouldn't get there by tonight, and something really awful would happen in the morning. What would the king do to Opal and her family if she didn't spin the straw into gold? How could I go back home if I failed? The road widened, and small houses started to appear. Their windows all dark and quiet. It must have been very late, but the houses gave me hope that I was close to the king's city. The houses got closer together and smaller. Then very close and stacked on top of each other. They looked like little towers made out of rubble that a wind might blow over. Then they spread out a little and got bigger, a lot bigger. The road began to wind and curve up a steep hill, and at the top was a giant stone wall. Beyond that wall was King Barf's castle. Opal was there. Nothing would not go up the hill. It was almost as steep as the mountain, and no matter how much I poked and jerked and kicked, he wouldn't budge. So I reasoned that if he wouldn't budge for me, maybe he'd budge for anyone else either. He wouldn't budge for anyone else either. I left him on the side of the road by a tree, and I hoped a swarm of pixies would bite his bony, stubborn rump. Halfway up the hill, my courage started to drain with my energy. In all the excitement of being a hero, I hadn't thought of any of this through. When I started my journey, it was as if all the obstacles in my way weren't really obstacles at all, just minor annoyances. But when I reached the top of the hill, I realized that they were definitely obstacles, and big ones. The castle was surrounded by towering walls with closed gates and soldiers guarding those gates with spears and bows and arrows. Would I be a coward if I went back down the hill? What would Gran do? It was a silly question. Gran would never have gotten herself into this mess in the first place. Oh, how I wish I could talk to her now. I needed to think. I thought about what was in my way and what I had to do to get it out of my way. I needed to get to Opal in the castle, but in my way there were guards and spears and arrows and a stone wall and possibly more of that beyond the wall. What did I have? An ornery donkey stuck at the bottom of a hill, a dry loaf of bread, and an old bobbin. And one more thing. At that very moment, a miracle happened. A horse and cart came up the hill, and the driver hopped down to speak with the guards. "Straw deliveries to go to the castle," he said to one of the guards. "Other side of the castle. There ear straw ain't for no stables. This is for a chamber. Had an order for it to be brought this way." What do you think that they're bringing straw in the castle for? It's not for the stables. Probably to see if Opal can spin it into gold. "This here straw ain't for no stables. This is for a chamber. Had an order for it to be brought this way. Tonight? I've got a letter." Straw for a chamber? That had to be for Opal. The guard looked down at the letter the man was holding out. While they spoke, I crept to to the back of the cart, unseen by the guards or the driver. I pulled myself up and dug myself into the straw until I was completely hidden. In a moment, I heard the gate squeak open and the cart rolled forward. I almost laughed. The cart ambled on for a minute, but then stopped, and I heard the driver unhitch the mule. The driver spoke with probably more guards, and then I was pretty sure we were inside the castle because everything started to echo. The straw was scratching my arm and neck and everywhere. I struggled to remain still, and the itching stirred up an uncomfortable memory also involving straw. It had been a few years ago. I was hiding from Frederick and Bruno in a barn behind a huge stack of straw. They were mad at me because I had sneezed really loudly in the middle of their older brother's wedding, right at the quiet part. So Frederick and Bruno were chasing after me, trying to light my pants on fire. The whole barn burned down, and I barely made it out alive. Needless to say, my pants did catch fire. The memory made me shudder. I suddenly wondered that I jumped into this pile of straw so readily. Finally, the cart stopped, and the man knocked on the door. A few muffled exchanges. I heard a woman's voice, Opal's maybe. Suddenly, I was tumbling out of the cart, rolling in the straw as it came down. The straw still covered me on the floor, and I heard the cart trundle away as the door shut. I was about to peek when I felt hands digging into the straw, pulling out big clumps. I froze, and then someone grabbed my hair and yanked. I yelped and flopped out of the straw, hitting my head on the floor with a loud crack. "Oh," said a voice. I looked up and saw a woman standing over me, but it was not Opal. The woman had a feather duster and a rag tucked in her skirt. She was older but tried to hide it with lots of rouge on her cheeks and lips. Rouge is makeup. She was holding a big piece of fabric in one hand and a fistful of straw in the other. This straw was to stuff a mattress. This wasn't for spinning. The maid's surprised face suddenly turned red. She scooted back and reached for something behind her, a poker, and she pointed it right at me. "Get out, you little rascal. There's nothing in here for you to steal." I wasn't. She whacked me on the shoulder with the poker. "Get out," she whacked me again. "You filthy mongrel, get out." I stumbled to my feet. My satchel clutched me. I tried to reach for the door, but the woman swung at me again, and I rolled to the other side of the room. "Thief!" the woman shrieked. "Thief!" I ducked as she jabbed at me again. "Thief in the castle!" She lunged with the poker until I was pressed up against a window. A window! I hadn't gone up any stairs, so the ground must be just below. I felt behind me until I found the latch. The window flew open and I tumbled out, lying flat on my back. All the air was knocked out of me, and a few sparks flew in my eyes. But I had to run because the maid's bellowing was sure to bring guards after me at any moment. I ran along the castle walls until I found some bushes to hide in, and then dove in. Ugh! They were full of thorns. I held still but didn't breathe. Thorns stuck me everywhere, but I bit down on my tongue and I watched as guards came to the window I had fallen out of. A few jumped out and walked around, searching. One came to the very bush I was hiding in, but it was so dark and I was so still he didn't see me. Soon they were all gone. I forced myself to wait in the bush a little longer, and while I did, all my pains sank in. My head and my back were sore from the fall, and my shoulders stung from the maid's whacks. I had needle thorns sticking in my head and arms, but especially in my bottom. Destiny can be so cruel. I looked to the sky, wondering how long before dawn. The sky was dark, but there couldn't be more than a few hours, maybe even less. How much straw had the king given Opal to spin? And how long did she have to spin it? I'd better find her fast. Slowly, I crept out of the bush and tried to remove all the thorns. The earth was wet and squishy beneath my feet, so my steps made squelching sounds. I froze and waited for movement or noise. All was still. Heroic rescues are not glamorous as people imagined. I thought as I squished along in the muck. The next step was to find a tower. I was sure Opal would be locked up in one. In grand stories, damsels in distress were always trapped in towers. That was the point of towers, so no one could rescue you unless your hair was a mile long. Opal's hair wasn't that long, so how to get in? He's referencing another story here. Write it in the comments if you know what he's talking about. There were many towers in the castle. Which tower? Think. Most of the windows are dark, but 2 towers had lights on in them that I could see. I considered the location of each tower. They were on opposite ends of the castle. On one end was the main gate to the castle, where the king and queen and other royal guests made their grand entrances. On the other end were the stables and the blacksmith, where there were piles and piles of straw. If you needed to fill a room with straw, it would be better if the room were near the straw. I approached the tower on the stable side. There was no one around, not even guards, which seemed odd. I put my hands on the tower wall, feeling around. A few stones budged. I could fit my hands easily in the cracks. I pulled one stone out completely. You'd think someone as rich as King Barf would keep his castle in better repair, but there were so many holes and loose stones. But I suppose King Barf didn't worry much about the outside of his castle. He probably paid more attention to the inside, where all the gold was. I started to climb. It wasn't too difficult, almost like climbing a tree. I just had to test each hole to make sure they would support my weight. Being small and skinny was really working in my favor. If I were a hulking, armor-clad hero, the tower would have crumbled like dry bread. Tired and out of breath, I finally reached the window. Mercifully, it opened. I heard whimpering and sniffling. Someone was crying. It had to be Opal. With the last of my strength, I pulled myself up, slid over the window, and flapped onto the ground like a giant slug. Simile. He's comparing himself to a slug. Oh! Opal rushed to the fireplace and grabbed the poker. She stood over me, the poker raised over her head. I flinched. Opal lowered her weapon and stared at me with her big blue eyes. What are you doing here? I'm here to rescue you, I said. She stared at me blankly. So blankly, I thought she hadn't heard me. And then she laughed. She laughed and laughed, high and shrill, and finally she snorted. Aren't you the one called Butt? It wasn't exactly the heroic welcome I had hoped for. Rump, I said. They call me Rump. Rump, she said, holding back a laugh. Rump, my hero. Then she burst into more laughter. She leaned over, holding her stomach. She hee-hee-heed and ha-ha-ha'd and giggle-gaggled and fell into the straw, rolling in it like one of her brothers. And then suddenly she was crying. Not just whimper, whimper, sniffle, sniffle, crying. Her whole body heaved with sobs and snot ran down her face, and she didn't even bother to wipe it off. Help me? You? She sobbed. I'm supposed to turn this straw into gold because my father told the king I could. I was getting nervous about all the noise she was making. What if someone came into the room to see if she was all right? Opal sobbed again. Why did he do that? Because I can spin the straw into gold, I said. Your father knows I can. That's why he told the king. He didn't think he would take you away. He just thought the king would ask for more gold. Opal stopped crying and wiped the snot from her nose on her sleeve. You? The gold? You can spin the gold? I was surprised that she was so surprised. Had she never seen the gold before? Hadn't she wondered what I've been trading for all of these months? Yes, I can spin the gold. Opal wrinkled her nose as if I smelled rancid. Prove it. Spin that into gold. She pointed to the heaping pile of straw in the corner. It was more than I had ever spun at once, maybe 3 or 4 mattresses full. In front of it was a spinning wheel, big and shiny, the wood freshly carved and polished. Well, said Opal. She was tapping her foot impatiently. What are you waiting for? She didn't look so sweet or innocent anymore. I sat down at the wheel and took a few straws in my hand. I could see things through Opal's eyes now, how ridiculous this seemed. Me? Spin straw into gold? How could a small, foolish boy possibly do such a thing? I had thought myself a great hero, but now I saw how silly I looked. With shaking hands, I fed the straw through the wheel and spun, holding my breath, ready for it to break and fall to the ground, just to mock me. Whir, whir, whir. Gold rapped onto the bobbin. I released my breath. Opal gasped and clapped her hands to her mouth. Her eyes showed that same greedy gleam I knew so well from her father. She reached to touch the gold, but my hand came down over the bobbin. What will you give me? I asked. Give you? I have to give you something? If you want me to spin a pile of straw into gold for you. You want me to spin a pile of straw of gold for you for nothing? What do you want? I thought of all the things I wanted. More food on the mountain, a horse to replace nothing, more hens, a family, a whole name. But the mere thought of asking for anything made my tongue swell and my mouth clamp shut. Just as the witch had said, I could make no requests, only beg and take what was offered. What will you give me? I asked. Opal wound her tongue around her mouth, eyes blank. She put her finger to her lips and her hands on her waist. Oh, bother. What was going through her mind? I was beginning to suspect that the name Opal bestowed a destiny that gave you lots of looks, but maybe not many brains. Finally, she felt at her neck. I will give you my necklace, she said, and relief washed over me once again. My father gave it to me. It's made of pure gold. Probably gold I spun. I took the necklace and stuffed it in my pocket, breathing deeply. That wasn't so bad. Shut the windows, I said, getting down to business. They were still gaping open from my arrival. I like the fresh air. The straw makes me sneeze. I'm going to make a pile of gold. Every pixie within a mile of here will be swarming this room if you leave those windows open, and that will probably be worse than a sneeze. She scowled at me and shut the windows. I began to spin again. Whir, whir, whir. Bit by bit, I worked on the pile of straw. As it dwindled, a stack of gold took its place. Opal watched, transfixed for a while, and then fell asleep on the floor. A skein of gold clutched in her hands. I spun the last straw, just as the sky turned purple. I clawed out the window, my eyes so heavy and my limbs so tired, I had to concentrate extra hard just to make my fingertips grip the wall. I had done my duty, and now I could go home. But first, I needed to eat and have a little rest. I made my way across the castle grounds to the stables, where I ate the rest of the bread from my satchel. I was so thirsty I drank water from a horse's trough. The horse didn't seem to mind. Then I found an empty stall and made myself a nest of straw. I became quite fond of straw. It's comfortable to sleep in, and pixies don't like it. Straw's better than gold, I thought. Just as I was drifting to sleep, I swore to myself that I would never spin again. Never. And I didn't want to look at gold ever again. But I was very tired, and I wasn't thinking clearly. All right, that was chapter 14, Rump to the rescue. So Rump found Opal and went up to the tower to meet her, and then he spun all that gold for her so that she wouldn't get into trouble with the king. Tomorrow we're going to read chapter 15, titled Straw, Straw, Straw. All right, friends, see you then. Bye.